Great.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Hangout today. We're really pleased that you've come and joined us again. If you'd like to participate then, and you're on Google+, then just click the Q&A button and ask a question, and we'll put that one to our guest today. Dan, who's joining us on the Hangout today?
Yeah, welcome everybody. Hope you're all having a good lunchtime, or if you're watching later on YouTube, I hope you're doing well. Yeah, today we have Steve Cooper joining us, right from his Cry in the Dark offices, which we'll hear about in a little bit. But Steve, how are you doing? Welcome.
I'm good, thanks, Dan. How are you?
I'm absolutely great. Yeah, fantastic. Why don't you tell us, first of all, your name's Steve, where do you live, and what do you do right now?
Okay, my name's Steve, as you just said. I live in Colchester. I go to Kingsland Church. And I'm the CEO and founder of the organisation Cry in the Dark.
Wow. Okay, so you're at your Cry in the Dark office right now, is that right?
Yes, I am. A converted garage.
A converted garage. Amazing.
But Steve, last week you were on a bike somewhere, up and down, all over the place, weren't you? Where were you riding?
Where have I been riding?
Yeah, I saw on Facebook you were off on some mission.
Oh no, me and Bernie just go out for bike rides because we enjoy cycling. So we did a 50-miler on Saturday and went around Stoke Nayland and Dedham, and it's just what we do for relaxation, basically.
Wow.
But you also cycle across Romania, don't you?
Yes, I have cycled across Romania from Bucharest to Comănești, which is about nearly 300 miles. And this weekend I'm cycling up at Kilda Water. And we're doing 4 laps of a dam, which should be about 112 miles.
Wow, that's a lot of cycling.
Yes, but it's good. It's good.
Okay, I'm going to jump in there. So, with all this cycling stuff, I'm guessing that's a hobby, right? That's kind of what you just do for fun.
Yes, it is, but it's also a way that Cry in the Dark used to help us raise funds, or it has been in the past.
Okay.
And we have got plans for, or I've got plans for a big ride next year.
Okay, where would that be?
California.
Nice. Whereabouts?
We want to cycle in 7 days from San Francisco down to San Diego. And
Wow.
it's probably just under 700 miles, I think.
Wow. So what kind of training would you have to do for that?
A lot. Hence, me and Bernie thinks he might want to do it, and the idea being is that it would be self-funded, but you'd also then put out for sponsorship as well, so people could see that you've actually had a financial input into the event, but you're also asking to be sponsored, because they're going to cycle we're going to cycle probably between 115 miles to 80 miles a day, wow, depending on the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So cycling's a big part of what I do now.
That's a lot of mileage. What motivates you to do that?
In the beginning, Michelle, I think what motivated me to do that was the fact that I was raising money for our cause in Romania, what we do for the kids. That was the main motivation. Since then, I've got into cycling. I didn't really enjoy it to start with, but I've got into it, and it's a way of keeping fit as well, and it helps me think. It's a great way of making friends. Me and Bernie, we talk about all sorts of things when we're out cycling, and it's a great way of just to relax and also to unload stuff when you're talking to your friends. It's quite nice actually, and you see a lot of Essex and other places in the world, not just Essex, but you see a lot of places, and it's beautiful actually. The mountains in Romania last year were just fantastic. I mean, we cycled above the clouds, and we were actually above a rainbow at one point. And you just see it, and you can really appreciate God's creation. It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about then Cry in the Dark, which you mentioned you're CEO of. So Cry in the Dark has got quite a lot of connections with Kingsland as well, isn't it? Quite a few people from Kingsland have come out, so a few people might be a little bit familiar, but just give us a basic rundown. What is Cry in the Dark? What do you guys do? What's like your aim?
Okay. Cry in the Dark was started back in 1998 for a specific group of children that I found in Romania who were being badly treated by the authorities who were supposedly looking after them. It grew from that. I believe God called us to help those children. Since then, we've developed our work in Romania, and we have really 3 projects now. We have a home called Casa Lumina, which is a residential home for the very same orphans that we found back in 1998. It's become their permanent home. And we also run hospice and palliative care services in the community at the moment, but we'll talk about future plans later. And we also have an outreach program to, at the moment, one community in particular, which is Roma. And there's 700 people live in what I would say near third world conditions in the northeast of Romania, and we reach out to the kids and the young people there. So there are 3 things we do. So in a nutshell, if you wanted to sum it up, it would be that we work with people who are marginalised through sickness, poverty or culture. Just as circumstances, really.
Yeah. What put Romania on your heart to start with? Like, how did you end up going there for the first time?
Well, what actually happened, Dan, was I'd been to, in 1996, I went off to, went off to Belarus to help Samaritan's Purse, help them renovate an orphanage. And it was there in that orphanage, I was only there for a week, putting in lights and sockets and stuff like that. Got a few electric shocks because the drunk Russian electrician didn't switch the power off, but I'm still here. And it was great fun, but it was also challenging because it was there was 200 kids there, and it was a happy place, but it could also be a very sad place. There were kids there with limbs missing. There were kids there who'd been affected from the fallout from Chernobyl, from radiation. So it'll be happy one day and could be quite sad the next. But it was there in Belarus, really, that I believe God gave me His heart for these sick and dying orphan kids, really. And I had a few questions to ask God at that point. And on my last day in Belarus, I went into the ward where I was working, and there was a small baby in a cot who I don't think she had any arms. She'd been born without any arms. And I'd seen this little girl every day for a week. And I just went in on my last day. I'd finished my work. I was just sort of, interacting with the kids and stuff. And I went up to the cot, and for those of you who know me quite well, I'm not particularly a brilliant singer, but I tried to sing a little worship song to this baby. And I started to sing, but I couldn't sing because my throat just sort of closed. I was too emotional, and I was too upset, really, because I started to think, why didn't God do something for these children? Why didn't God, make a difference to these kids? And I left the ward, and I actually ran into the forest because this place was isolated. It was in the middle of a forest. And I remember sitting down on a log somewhere in this forest, and I remember asking God, why don't you do something about this? Why can't you help these kids? And after a while, I was sitting there. My brother-in-law, who had been a Christian a bit longer than me and was out on the trip, he found me and he said, "What's wrong, Steve?" And I started to share with him, why doesn't God do something? Why doesn't He help these kids? And my brother-in-law just said to me, "Well, let's sit here, Steve, for a while and let's pray and ask God." And so as we started to pray, God quite simply said a couple of things, really. But what was, for me, the thing that really stuck was this. He said, "But I do something about it. I send people like you and like me to be my hands and my feet and my love." And that statement really stayed with me, has stayed with me ever since. And I believe that's what God's church is. It's His tool for getting His mission done, which is to bless people and bless the nations. If we go right back to Genesis 12, that's what we're about. We're about a people who bring blessing to others, and through our work, we try and bless others. So I came back from Romania that year, and God put these kids on my heart. And one of the things I did, I ran the London Marathon for the kids to raise money, which was actually quite instrumental in me getting out to Romania, because what actually happened was the following year I went out to Romania with Samaritan's Purse again to help build a home called Rachel's House. And I used my holidays. I was away for a month, and we helped build this home, and we visited kids in the local hospital who were going to use this home, who were all suffering with HIV/AIDS at the time. And I came back from there, and I started to do my normal job, which at the time I was living in South London. And at the time I was an electrician, and I was just fixing domestic appliances. And so I knocked on this lady's door to fix her electric cooker, thinking about, you know, the job really. And she opened the door, and she said she'd been waiting for me to come because she'd been away. So I said to her, oh, I said, you know, where have you been? You've been somewhere nice? And she said, well, not really. She said, I've been to Romania. So this was like the summer of '97 now. And I said to her, oh, I said, that's really weird. I said, because I've just come back from Romania. You know, why were you in Romania? And so she started to tell me that her daughter worked in an orphanage as a volunteer in a place called Doftana. And in Doftana at the time were just 26 special needs orphans who were living in the most appalling conditions. And as she started to talk to me, I said to her that I've been to these places. I've been to Russia and I've been to Romania. And I said to her, I actually started to feel challenged actually by what she was telling me. And she started to show me photographs, and I saw kids who were malnourished. I saw kids who were barely clothed, the typical look with the head shaven and stuff like that, because that's what they used to do in the orphanages. And I started to feel challenged, and I was talking to her, and she said she had a piece of video. And she put this piece of video. She said, "Do you want to see it?" And I said, "Yeah, okay. I'll sit down and watch it." She said, "It only runs for about a minute." So I sat down in her living room, still trying to fix the cooker, and it did get fixed. So I started to watch the video. I started to watch the video, and in that video I saw kids again who were malnourished, looked like they may have been abused, we don't know, but I started to feel challenged because I knew that in my Bible I'd read somewhere that God doesn't like injustice, and to me it was only 1,500 miles away from where we live, and this was an injustice. Communism had finished in '89, but in 1997, these kids were still suffering at the hands of authorities who actually had a responsibility and a duty of care, and these kids were not being looked after. And so as I watched it, I felt God say to me, "Take the videotape." And I was like, you know, I'm just an electrician, you know, what am I going to do with a videotape? But I tried to be obedient, and when the tape finished, I just said to the lady, give me the videotape, and if I can help these children, then I'll try some people I know. There's a longer story to it. I don't know how much of a story you want, but that's basically what happened. And I tried for 2 or 3 months, different organisations, different friends, and for whatever reason, each door just seemed to shut, boom, 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 boom. And so after about 3 months of trying, in October '97, I went to see my pastor in my church, and I told him what had happened, and I told him I really believe that God's calling me to help these children, but every door seems to shut. So he gave me the best piece of advice he could as a pastor, and he just said to me, "Steve, you know what? If God really wants you to be involved, then you really need to go away and you need to pray about this." And that's what I did. It was simple, really. And I can't say I prayed about it every single day, but I started to pray about it. And in January '98, I was coming home from work, driving my little van. It was a cold Friday night, raining, probably still old enough to play football then, so I was probably thinking about playing football. A bit old for that now, but you know, I was trying to think about playing football. And for whatever reason, I had a picture, a photograph of one of the children from the Doftana orphanage in Romania on my seat in my car next to me. And as I was driving home, I started to think, you know, maybe I should have tried harder for these children. Maybe I should have tried a few more doors. And at this point, and for whoever's listening to this and might need to hear this, but God's a God who never gives up on us. He always gives us another chance, always. And I remember that evening, God gave me a massive chance to do what I believed he was calling me to do. And I got out of my car, put the key in the front door, and as I did, the phone was ringing. And I picked the phone up, say thinking about football or something, and the woman on the other end said, "Is Steve Cooper there?" And I said, "Yeah, you're speaking to him." She said, "Well, you don't really know me." She said, "But I run an organisation in Romania called Big and Hill for Romania, and we run a special needs school in Colchester, and we know about the children in Doftana. And I know that you had a conversation with a friend of mine, which was a lady with the cooker." So I was like, "Yeah." "And you said to that lady, you might be able to help." And at that point, I was like, "Whoa, yeah, I did say that because, you know, I'm just one person. I'm just Steve. I was just an electrician. And, you know, I'm not thinking about what God can do because I know God can do amazing things because I've seen him do them now." So I said, I did say that, and she said, well, I've got some news for you. She said, we've spoken to the authorities in Romania, and they've said, if you want to take the kids, you can take them. If you can find somewhere in Romania for them to live, you can have them. These kids are just a waste of space. These kids are just locally known as the dregs. And at that point, I knew that God was calling me to go to Romania. So I got three friends together, 2 Christians and 1 non-Christian, and in February 1998 we flew out to Doftana and saw the orphanage firsthand. And we walked around this old dilapidated palace, and as we did, I started to film. There was only 2 members of staff there. Some of the kids were partly clothed. Some of the kids had been told to sit on pieces of cloth under the stairs, not told to move, because the staff had cleaned the floors because they knew we were coming. And as we walked around, and I was filming, this little girl there, who I now know and is in our care, Roxana Nikita, she took me by the hand and she led me across the floor to a doorway, and there was a closed door, and she simply opened the door and sort of pulled me inside this room, and I've just entered into a pitch black room, and I didn't know what was in there, and I started to walk in this darkness, and as I did, I slipped on something, and what I realised I slipped on was a small child lying on the floor, covered in her own excrement, just left there, who I later found out was a little girl called Doina, who had cerebral palsy, doesn't speak, can't walk. And at that point, I called my friend in, Andy, to take some photos, because we wanted to prove what was going on if we were to help these children. And as I stood there, we got our torches on at this point. We realised we were in a bedroom, and there was blankets nailed up to the windows. There was no lights. There was about another 2 or 3 children just sitting in the darkness looking at us. And at that point, a woman rushed in, and she picked Doina up by the wrist and just dangled her in the air, and didn't touch her really, just dangled her by the wrist and dropped her onto this bed, left her covered in her own mess, and decided just to clean the floor and left the child. But as I stood there in the darkness of Doftana, for me, I just felt God say to me, enough is enough. That's all he said, enough is enough. And I knew that God was calling us to help these kids, and so that's what the story really, that's what happened.
Wow, that's incredible. So when all that was going on, did you have any idea that it would turn into what Cry in the Dark is now? I mean, you've mentioned loads of projects, people coming out. I mean, it must be quite an amazing thing to see it develop in the way that it has.
Quite emotional now.
You got me crying. I need a tissue.
I never had a clue, Dan and Michelle. I didn't really have a clue as to what God was going to do. I just knew it was one step at a time. I knew when we stood in the darkness of the Doftana Orchard, we had nothing apart from what I believe was the love that God had for these kids. And we came back, and within 3 weeks, well, within a week, 3 of us had received £1,000 each from various people who we'd told about what happened. And we were like, well, if that isn't confirmation that we're supposed to do something for these kids, then I don't know what is. So the vision, what happened was, we held a prayer meeting at my little house church where I was going at the time, and we broke into two like little prayer groups, and I was in one, and my older sister, who'd been a Christian longer than me, was in another. And as we was praying, I heard my sister say, but Father God, nobody hears these children's cries apart from you. These children, they just cry in the dark. And I was standing there in the other group, and I heard her say this, and I was like, whoa, you know, if we're going to have a ministry or a fund or something, we need to call it Cry in the Dark, because this is exactly what these kids were doing. And so we started to pray some more, and we ran with the vision to provide a permanent home for those children. So that was our initial vision, was to provide a permanent home for these kids for as long as each young person needed it. And that's what we did. That was like February 98. By May 2000, we'd raised over £80,000 and we opened on May the 28th, we had a dedication, but on May the 29th, 2000, we opened the doors to Casa Lamina, and the very same children who we found in Doftana, apart from two who died in state care, were all moved into Casa Lamina, which means House of Light. And so for me, I thought, you know, well, that's it, you know, that's sort of job done, and happy Christmas, and, you know, we can get on with our lives, go back to being an electrician, but God had other plans.
It sounds like a dodgy cooker, and God completely changed your life. When did you become a Christian?
I'd only become a Christian in December 1995.
Okay. What made you want to become a Christian?
Oh, okay, right.
Well, it's clearly completely changed your life. You were an electrician. You now run a charity. It turned everything upside down. So what made you want to do that?
Okay. I suppose, like a lot of us, we've all got a little bit of a history to our past. I can't really, I'm not going to go into that at the moment, but obviously everyone has a history, and I started, you know, me and my wife, we had a baby, and that was a big thing, really, and that starts to make you think differently about your life when a new child comes into the world, or a baby comes into your life. It makes you think about things, and I'd always been a person who started to think there must be more than this. You can't just live. You have children, you die. They live, they have children, you die. There must be more to this than this. And it was really Angela at the time who wanted to go to church, and I didn't really want to go. And she said, and I used to say to her, because my sisters were both Christians, and I used to say to her, and they'd invite us around for dinner, and we'd have this theological discussions, or they would at us more than with us, and I would more or less be like, well, you know what, if you want to worship the dustbin down the alley, you can worship it, but don't ask me to do that, because I don't want to do it. Yeah, so
what changed from the major skeptic?
Well, that was my attitude. So eventually what happened was, then we had a second baby, had a boy and a girl, and we started to look for somewhere to get rid of them on a Sunday morning. Oh, let's send them to church so we can do what we want on a Sunday morning, cut the grass, whatever we want to do, read the newspaper, have coffee, whatever you want to do, you know, get rid of the kids. And so that's what happened. We started to visit churches, and at the same time, my sister, who had been a Christian longer than me, was also thinking about leaving her church at the time and going somewhere else. So we started to visit a couple of churches with them, but not really with the intent of joining the church, just getting rid of the kids. And then what happened was, they decided that they wanted to join a little house church in Pollard's Hill in South London called The Way Christian Fellowship. And they invited us to go to The Way Christian Fellowship, which was literally in someone's living room. And I got there, and I sat there, and I started to see things in this little house church that I'd never experienced in a church before. For instance, people actually praying out loud. And it was really weird, because when these people were praying prayers, it was like somebody was talking to me. It was like somebody knew something about my life, and it was just like incredible. But what I really liked, and what really attracted me to the church, was the kids' songs. I loved the kids' worship songs. And we went that week, and sort of my wife, Angela, at the time said to me, well, what do you think about it, Steve? And I said, yes, right. I said, you know, it's different. I feel something there that I've never felt in a church before. And I actually shared that with one of the guys from the church, and he simply said to me, that's because the Holy Spirit's here. And I was like, yeah, whatever, because I didn't really understand. I didn't understand. And so we started to go, and then in December 1995, as I say, it was just a living room. There was only about 20, 30 people there. It was very quiet. And the pastor went down the front of the church. The kids had gone out, and he started to preach. And he actually said, I remember, he said, you know, if there's anybody here who wants to give their life to Jesus, maybe now is the time. You might not know what's going to happen to you. You could get run over. You know, anything could happen. And I sat there, and it was like, it was like my heart was going to burst in the middle of my chest if I didn't stand up and say something. And I remember sitting there, my heart beating in the middle of my chest, and I remember just standing up, and there was a lady sitting next to me, and she was just praying really quietly, and I just spoke to God, and I just said to him, you know, God, I believe you exist, and I believe that even Jesus lived, but you've never shown me or proven to me that you're there. And as I said that, okay, this is my story, remember, so this is what I remember and what I felt. I just remember a massive warmth and tingling sensation come right up through my body, head to foot, and I stood there and my hands started to shake, and the lady continued to pray next to me, and then I started to say to God that I was sorry for the things that I'd done in my life, and that I wanted Jesus in my life. And as I said that, it was like somebody lifted a massive weight off of my shoulders. It was like somebody unlocked something that was in me. And as I stood there, I just started to cry. And it was the day I gave my life to Jesus, really. And even at the end, I hadn't really understood what had happened. But our church was pretty good, because what they would do then, they would disciple you. And at the time, we did a lot of stuff from David Pawson, what it meant to be born again, repent, believe, baptise, receive, and we went through a whole course of that, and all that sort of stuff. But I was in this place that I'd found Jesus. Well, he found me, because Jesus is never lost. It's us who are lost. So it's actually him finding me. And I just remember going to church, and I wanted to do something with my Christianity. I didn't just want to be a Christian who went to church and said their prayers and read their Bible, which there's nothing wrong with, but I believed there was an action that needed to take place. And I remember that I used to read a lot of Tony Campolo stuff, and he was like at the time, he was more like my Christian hero, and I'd listen to tapes about injustice and about fair trade, and I think what happened was that through that, God planted this seed against injustice. And you know, when I discovered those children in Doftana, it was a massive injustice. And you know, we're called as the church to stand up for injustice wherever we find it, whether it's in Romania or whether it's in our own homes or in our own offices or schools. That's what we're called to do, really.
So with that said, what would you say to someone watching this who maybe isn't sure how at the moment to put their faith into action? Like, they want to do something for God, they're just not sure what to do. I mean, obviously there was a stage before Romania came into your heart where you were wanting to do something. How do you then, how do you ask God, like how does that work? Like, what do you do to start working out what it is you want to be doing for the kingdom?
Dan, that's exactly what you just said, is how do you ask God? You do ask God. And you have to open yourself up to God, and you pray and you read your word. And the two really should be going in hand in hand. If you know, for me, because I had this heart for injustice, when I read something like God has compassion for widows and orphans, well, when He has compassion for widows and orphans, He doesn't lie; it's the truth. And in my heart, He put that compassion. So I would say to people that you ask God to give you something that will break your heart, because if your heart is in communion with God's heart, that will be God's heart too. And very often, and I think it was Mike Pilavachi, wasn't me. I'd like it to be me, but it wasn't. He said the Bible in certain places, I don't know the passages, but a work of God very often starts with tears. And for me, sometimes when God moves me to a place of praying and I start to cry, my heart is broken, that's normally a sign for me that God is at work and wants me to move in a direction. You have to try doors as well. Some doors will shut, but what I would say to anybody who's starting out along the road and wants to be a missionary, from my own personal experience, you know, ups and downs, it's not all a rose garden, believe me, it's not, is to make sure that that is what God's calling you to be, because a mission field in the world is a tough place, because the world is a tough place, and that's where you are. It's not an easy place to be always, and it costs it costs you spiritually, financially, and probably emotionally. They're all things that you need to, make sure that you're sound about.
Yeah.
Steve, you've made me laugh. You've made me cry. I'm a wreck now. So asking you on the Hangout was definitely dangerous.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap this up, but just a quick thing. We could talk to you all lunchtime here quite happily. What's the question? The question is, Steve, God's changed your life dramatically, and through you, He's just brought so many good things. What's happening next in Romania? If people want to get involved, how can they get involved? And where do people, if people catch this, where do they go from here?
Okay. Well, the first thing you can do, I'll plug that. You find us on Facebook. That's where everything that's current goes on. Facebook. And Beth does Twitter. I haven't got a clue how to twit or whatever it is. Twittering. So I don't know that. But Beth does.
You're a great twit.
I'm great at twittering. So very quickly, so yeah, you can find stuff going on at our website www.crimedark.org. But currently in Romania, we've got mission teams going out, which we run every summer. If you're a church, if you're a missional, youth group or an adult group, you want to come out, contact us. Next year, we want to run 3-month microgap for people, not just students. This is for adults as well. If they want to break from their career, if they want to come out and serve for 3 months. They can come from June to September next year. We've got a couple of people already interested for next year's microgap. But what's happening in Romania is quite exciting. We are very much a hands-on organisation that do practical things to show our witness to people. Is how we love people. And at the moment, we something which really needs a lot of prayer is we have applied for a huge grant. From an organisation, I can't tell you who it is because that would be unfair to do that. And if this comes off, if we win it, we've got actually an interview in Bucharest in a few weeks, which is a good place to be. They've accepted the application. It would mean that we probably open another unit for children, for inpatients, which we haven't been able to do up until now. And so it's just another expansion of our work, and it means we may be able to work in 3 counties instead of just 1. So when I look back, right, Dan, because you're bound to just quickly, we've gone from 24 kids back in 1998. We reach thousands of people every year on our hospice program. We reached a village of 700, and now if this comes off and if it's what God wants, we could be reaching thousands more people through our work in Romania.
Wow.
It's like that ripple effect, isn't it? When you drop that pebble into the pool and the ripples go out.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's what's happening in Romania. We've got a lot of mission teams this summer. It should be an exciting summer. We have fun. So yeah, thanks guys for allowing me to be on Hangout.
It's a pleasure. We're going to be following you on Twitter, on Facebook, and just love to hear more about it next time you come back. I hope the summer goes really well in Romania. Thanks for coming and joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Dan.
I gotta find some tissues now. You've wrecked me.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Dan.